So 2025 has been a very difficult year for the US-India relationship. The year ends with Donald Trump's 50% tariff on India still intact, a trade deal between the two countries has still not been signed, and the Trump administration is still making major outreaches to Pakistan. If you had told anyone at all in January this year that this is where the India-US relationship would be, you would have been laughed at. After all, just a couple of years ago, former US President Joe Biden was telling us that the India-US partnership was the defining partnership of the 21st century. Now, you've heard a lot of this over the last couple of months, but today I wanted to talk to you about the future. What comes next? And in 2026, is it really possible to fix the US-India partnership? And what will it take? Now I'll tell you my view up front. I'm currently reporting to you from Washington, D.C., and there is a sense here that tensions between the United States and India can actually be worked out. And the plan goes something like this. The two countries sign a trade deal within the next couple of months, following which they hold a Quad summit, where Prime Minister Modi and President Trump will meet. This allows both sides to take a beat, assess the political damage that has been done, and start repairing the relationship. But also, to be realistic, it's not clear that this plan will work out, because the problems between America and India right now might not go away, even if you sign a trade deal or hold a Quad summit. These problems are actually much more fundamental and deep, and they are rooted in Donald Trump's worldview and the worldview of the Make America Great movement, which he brought to power. So my argument to you today is this. A strong MAGA movement led by Donald Trump cannot coexist with a strong US-India relationship. And let me explain what I mean by that, because it is a bit of a controversial statement. There is little doubt today that America is India's most important strategic relationship, and it is built on a few key pillars. Firstly, there's investments. India believes that partnering with America will allow India to transform itself through access to investments and technology. A good example of this is what Apple is doing in India by building factories, hiring tens of thousands of workers to make smartphones and electronics in India. You might have seen the news headline that despite Trump's 50% tariff on India, Indian exports to the United States have continued to increase, primarily on the backs of exports of electronics and smartphones. If you look at AI, semiconductors, electric vehicle batteries, or any other industry that will dominate the future of the world, US companies that dominate these technologies are investing in India. It benefits them and it benefits India as well. So if India wants to develop, it needs investment and technology, both of which America has. The second pillar of the relationship is China. Over the last decade, decision makers in Delhi have become convinced that Beijing is India's biggest strategic threat. And you know who agrees with that assessment? Washington. And for the last 20 years, India and America have looked at each other as partners in this joint venture of dealing with China. So the Quad, $25 to $30 billion in defense sales that have happened, fighter jet engine cooperation, critical minerals, supply chains, a lot of this cooperation happened because New Delhi and Washington realized that they were pretty much in the same boat when it came to the rise of China and that they had to work together. In fact, if you look at past national security documents from the United States, where they lay out their view of the world, Washington explicitly stated that it wanted India to rise as a powerful geopolitical actor. Now, this was not out of the goodness of America's heart, by the way. The rise of India naturally balances Chinese power in Asia, which is in America's interest. And it's in India's interest as well. Now, the third pillar is people. And this is a story that is familiar to most of us. Just 60 years ago, US laws allowed very, very few people from countries like India to immigrate to the United States. And then in 1965 came the Immigration and Nationality Act, which removed a lot of those curbs and limits and opened up the United States to migration from many parts of the world. This and other changes like the H-1B visa and the IT revolution allowed millions of Indians to study in the United States, work there, and later settle down there. Indians went from barely registering in the national census to a community that was roughly 5 million strong. And some of the most recognizable faces in the world today, like Sajjan Nadella, Kamala Harris, Sundar Pichai, are Indian American. By opening itself up to Indian immigration, America also changed how it was perceived in India. S. Jaishankar spoke some time ago about how the H-1B visa transformed the India-US relationship. Now, the point of telling you all of this is to say that Donald Trump and the Make America Great movement have weakened each of these three pillars. The first is trade and investment. Now, President Trump has made clear that he thinks that the current global economic system has been deeply unfair to America. Trump and his movement rose to power in 2016 with a very simple message. America has been taken advantage of by other countries, and it is time to fix that. He thinks that rising countries, including India, have taken advantage of the United States, and he's determined to stop that. hence the 50% tariff on India, and also the calls on US businesses to stop sending manufacturing abroad. Remember that earlier this year, Trump threatened a tariff on Apple because it was not manufacturing in the United States, but instead expanding manufacturing in India. Now, this is in contrast to, say, the approach of the Biden administration, which was actually keen to have some forms of manufacturing move to India because it meant that US companies were leaving China. That leads us to the second pillar, China. Through his latest national security strategy and a host of other moves, Donald Trump has shown that he wants to take a much softer line on China. While he may still want to compete with Beijing, he wants business and trade deals more. Now, part of the reason for this is the belief among the Make America Great Again movement that America does not want to police the world anymore. Rather than compete with China and Asia, they want to tend to matters much closer to home. And that policy has serious implications for a country like India. The shared sense that China was a strategic challenge allowed India and the United States to work extremely closely together over the last 10 years. In fact, it made India a first-rate strategic priority for the US. But now Trump's policy on China is softer, it's more unfocused, it's more confused. And if more cooperation and less competition with China is Trump's policy, then that means that India has less value for Washington. And that explains why Trump has dragged his feet on doing the trade deal with India and removing tariffs. It also explains why Donald Trump's latest national security strategy only had very surface level mentions of India. It explains why Donald Trump has continued to pursue a relationship with Pakistan, despite the fact that India has raised a lot of concerns about that. Something that was missed in the analysis of Trump's national security strategy was that it has dropped all mention of supporting India's rise as a major power. That's a major shift. Finally, there's the people pillar. Over the last few years, the Trump administration's conservative allies have attacked the H-1B visa relentlessly. The administration has also made it much harder to get the H-1B visa by introducing a new 100,000 visa application fee, which is really affecting Indian professionals. Student visa restrictions have also increased, which makes it much less attractive for Indian students to want to go and study in the United States. And there's also another very, very troubling dimension to this. Online racism against Indian Americans, particularly on social media sites like X, has seen a massive uptick. There is a wing of extremists within Trump's Make America Great Again coalition that have supported this. An example of this is Laura Loomer, who is a conservative commentator who referred to Indians as third world invaders. By the way, she remains a close advisor to Trump even after saying that. And many Indian Americans feel disappointed that President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance have really not stepped up to defend Indian Americans. And this has confounded a lot of people because where did this come from? Indian Americans have contributed to the United States. They're often referred to as a moral minority. But conservative commentator David Frum actually explained why Indian Americans have been targeted extremely convincingly. To Trump, MAGA is a movement that is not optimistic about America's future. It is supported by people in parts of America that have been left behind by economic competition and globalization. To put it in Frum's way, MAGA is strongest where America is weakest and least competitive. An optimistic country that is confident about its future is open to immigrants from all over the world who make it stronger. But the MAGA movement that is led by Trump right now is not confident. It is scared. And it takes out that fear on immigrants, including those from India, whom they accuse of taking their jobs regardless of how much Indian Americans have contributed to the United States. But Frum also warned that attacking Indian Americans could damage the US relationship with India. And what we have seen is exactly that. H-1B and student visa restrictions, as well as online attacks on Indians, have damaged perceptions of the United States and India. So to sum up, the Trump administration's policies have weakened each of the three pillars that the India-US relationship stands on: investments, China, and people. Now, these tensions are deep and fundamental. They are not going to go away, even if President Trump and Prime Minister Modi have a spectacular summit, or even if they sign a trade deal. Now, this does not mean that we can't improve the relationship between the US and India. A trade deal will help Indian businesses, and most importantly, it will help stabilize the India-US relationship. And despite these tensions, India and the US have shown that they can still work together. They have announced a multi-billion-dollar energy deal, major defense purchases have been announced, and a 10-year defense partnership framework has been announced, despite what has happened over these last few difficult months. But the relationship will not be what it could be, or what it was on track to become just a few years ago. And so long as the Make America Great movement is what it is, the promise of this relationship, that it will become the defining partnership of the 21st century, that promise is going to be a lot more difficult to achieve. I'm Shashank Mattu, I'm the America correspondent for the Hindustan Times. Thank you so much for watching.